On this episode of China Uncensored, 2 Chinas for the price of 1. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell, and I've got a great idea for all you countries out there that need a little extra spending money. First, establish formal diplomatic ties with Taiwan. This will anger mainland China. Then, establish ties with mainland China and agree to break off ties with Taiwan in exchange for millions of dollars. That would never work, you say. Well, just ask Panama.
A big win for China and a major blow to Taiwan. Beijing on Tuesday welcoming formal ties with Panama after the Central American nation ditched relations with Taipei, saying it now only recognizes one China and Taiwan is part of it.
For those of you who need some background, once upon a time, that time being 1912, there was a country called the Republic of China that was in mainland China. But then, in 1949, the Chinese Communist Party seized control of mainland China and created the People's Republic of China. So the Republic of China government fled to the island of Taiwan, creating 2 Chinas. Ultimately, the 2 sides came to an agreement called the One China policy. That's where both sides agree there's only one China, they just also avoid saying which one is the one China. Which is all very normal and makes total sense. It's almost like each China exists in its own separate reality where they are the only China. And then they made the rest of the countries in the world choose which reality they wanted to live in. Confusing, but it could be worse. There could be 52 Chinas. But lately, the One China policy hasn't been working out too well for Taiwan. Sure, at first, most countries chose the Taiwan reality. But then in 1971, the United Nations formally recognized the Communist Party's People's Republic of China instead of Taiwan. And ever since, more and more countries have been following suit. Panama was one of Taiwan's oldest allies. It recognized the Republic of China since 1912, basically from its founding. But now Panama has found a shiny new ally. It's kind of like how in middle school you suddenly decided that instead of hanging out with Chris C., your best friend since preschool, you were going to hang out with that jerk Chris R. just because he had a Nintendo 64. Whatever. Anyway, now that Panama has dumped Taiwan, China's going to treat them right, with millions of dollars of infrastructure investments. The Chinese regime pulls this all the time with developing nations, especially those still allied with Taiwan. In the mid-90s, Taiwan was recognized by as many as 30 countries. Now it's down to just 20. When Costa Rica decided to make the switch, they were rewarded with this delightful new $100 million stadium. Are you not entertained? Some countries even pit both Chinas against each other / itself for more lucrative deals. Take St. Lucia. No, the tiny Caribbean island named after her that you've probably never heard of. It used to recognize Taiwan, but in 1997 it decided to switch allegiances to the Chinese Communist Party. That came with funding for large infrastructure projects. But in 2007, St. Lucia switched back to Taiwan because the foreign minister at the time is reported to have suggested that one should support those who give you the most. Which in this case meant a national tennis center. But then in 2011, St. Lucia switched allegiances yet again. The Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, a small African nation allied with Taiwan, told Bloomberg, "We get outrageous proposals telling us, if you sign with Beijing, we'll offer you $50 billion or even more." This doesn't mean Taiwan is on its own, though, just because 9 out of every 10 nations don't have formal diplomatic ties with it. For example, the United States recognizes the People's Republic of China, but also keeps up diplomatic ties with Taiwan in some roundabout ways. Following the split with Panama, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said the U.S. was committed to both the One China policy and to Taiwan. So we can have our pork bun and eat it too. In the U.S. and in many other countries, you can visit the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office. What's that? Well, I'm sure you might get some idea from their website, which you can visit at taiwanembassy.org. Of course, the Communist Party is no fool. They've been tricking people for ages. That's why Fiji just happened to close their Taiwan trade office just as Prime Minister Frankie B traveled to China. It was for Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Forum. The Chinese regime has also just been trying to get the name Taiwan off of these trade offices. Right, trade offices. Some countries even go a step further. At the start of the year, 2 Chinese companies announced they're going to build the world's tallest towers in Cambodia. A month later, the Cambodian Prime Minister decided to ban Tibetan and Taiwanese flags out of, respect for China's sovereignty. And we know which China they're talking about. Just for fun, imagine if the Chinese Communist Party cared about more than just countries. Imagine if they tried to bribe individual people who recognize the Republic of China as the one true China. Of course, that would be ridiculous. So what do you think of Panama breaking off ties with Taiwan and the Chinese regime trying to bribe other countries to do the same? Leave your comments below. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time. Shelley, I cannot believe the lengths the Chinese regime will go to stop Taiwan. Hello? Ambassador Sui. Would I be interested in China sponsoring a new multi-million-dollar studio?